1 minute ago, Westminster was thrown into total chaos, and the man at the centre of the storm is none other than Prime Minister Keir Starmer. In a shocking and unprecedented twist, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has just pulled the emergency brake on the entire UK visa system, freezing visas across the board in a move so drastic it's being described inside Whitehall as a political nuclear strike. Business visas, student visas, family reunion applications all stopped dead, without warning, without debate, without even a whisper of consultation. The fallout has been instant, and the fury inside Number 10 is boiling over. Starmer himself, we're told, erupted in anger when he discovered his own Home Secretary had detonated this policy grenade behind his back. This wasn't the carefully calculated plan Labour wanted to roll out to prove competence and stability. This was the panic button, pressed in the dead of night, leaving Britain bracing for a crisis that could reshape the entire government. What makes Mahmood's decision so extraordinary is not just the scope of it, but the sheer speed. Overnight, thousands of applicants found their cases frozen in limbo. Employers woke up to find they could not bring in skilled workers. Families desperate to reunite with loved ones were suddenly blocked. Universities, weeks away from welcoming international students, were left in panic mode, warning of financial disaster if their overseas intakes vanish. Airlines are scrambling because passengers already holding visas now face uncertainty about whether they'll even be allowed into the UK. This isn't a slow policy rollout with safety nets. It's an emergency freeze that has thrown the system into paralysis, and the timing could not be worse. Just days ago, Starmer was boasting about his measured, humane immigration strategy. Tonight, that strategy lies in tatters. Inside Downing Street, the fury is palpable. Sources close to Starmer describe him as incandescent, accusing Mahmood of humiliating his leadership and plunging his government into chaos. Starmer had been preparing a controlled immigration plan to steady nerves inside Labour and reassure voters growing restless over the small boats crisis. But that plan is now in shreds, ripped apart by his own Home Secretary. And here's where the drama escalates. Mahmood didn't back down. She defended her freeze as the only way to stop the asylum system from collapsing completely. According to insiders, she warned colleagues that without a hard stop, the system would crumble within months. That staggering admission that the immigration crisis is far worse than the government ever dared admit publicly has set off shockwaves, not just in Britain, but abroad. The political hypocrisy is already on full display. For years, Labour attacked Conservative ministers for even suggesting stricter immigration controls. When Priti Patel talked about sanctions in 2022, Labour MPs cried, "barbaric." When Suella Braverman proposed tougher restrictions, Labour accused her of cruelty and dog whistle politics. Now, under Labour, visas have been frozen outright, without warning, without parliamentary debate, without consultation. The Conservatives are circling like vultures, tearing into Starmer with accusations of hypocrisy on an historic scale. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp wasted no time, standing in Parliament to declare that Labour has gone further than even the hardest Tory policy. The line of attack is brutal. Labour condemned the Tories as cruel, but now Labour is inflicting an even harsher blow to legal migration. Even Labour MPs are reeling, many feeling betrayed, forced to defend a policy they once denounced as inhumane. The consequences are already rippling through Britain's economy. International students contribute nearly £30 billion a year, propping up universities and communities. Business visas bring in skilled workers vital to tech, healthcare and finance. Cutting these lifelines, even temporarily, risks strangling Britain's fragile recovery just as consumer confidence wobbles and growth remains sluggish. The Confederation of British Industry has issued dire warnings, saying this move sabotages Labour's own economic promises. Starmer's Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is said to be furious. She wasn't consulted, worried the freeze will trigger an economic shock that Labour cannot afford in its first months of power. Business leaders are ringing phones off the hook in Downing Street, demanding clarity, but the Home Office is offering none. Mahmood has refused to set a timeline for when visas will resume, saying only that the freeze will last as long as necessary. Weeks, months, nobody knows. And the international backlash is just beginning. India, Nigeria and Pakistan are preparing formal protests accusing the UK of punishing ordinary citizens with blanket restrictions. Diplomats are warning of retaliation, delays, denials and restrictions on British travellers and businesses trying to enter their countries. What began as a domestic immigration panic is mutating into a full-blown foreign policy nightmare. Britain's global reputation is at stake, trade relations could be jeopardised, and UK citizens themselves may find doors closing abroad. This is how a late-night panic button in Whitehall spirals into an international crisis. The atmosphere inside cabinet has been described as combustible. Defence Secretary Luke Pollard is reportedly outraged that Mahmood wants to repurpose military bases as detention centres, something Labour vowed during the election campaign they would never do. Chancellor Reeves fears the economy is about to take a body blow. Backbench Labour MPs are whispering rebellion, saying they cannot defend this freeze to their constituents. One MP described it bluntly. This is Rwanda flights all over again, but worse because it's Labour doing it. Starmer now faces the impossible choice: stand by his Home Secretary and risk economic collapse, or sack her and plunge the government into even deeper chaos. Either path could destroy him. This is no longer just about immigration policy, it's about survival. Starmer came to power promising stability after years of Conservative turmoil. Tonight, his government looks anything but stable. Mahmood's visa freeze has not only paralysed Britain's immigration system, it has paralysed Starmer's leadership. And the question echoing through Westminster right now is brutally simple. Can his government survive its first true crisis, or will this gamble by his Home Secretary bring it crashing down before it even begins? The aftershocks of Shabana Mahmood's visa freeze are still tearing through Westminster like a political earthquake, and the damage is spreading fast. What started as a single late-night order from the Home Office has now escalated into a full-blown war inside the Labour Party. MPs who just weeks ago celebrated victory are now in open revolt. Backbenchers are furious they weren't warned or consulted, accusing the leadership of betrayal. One insider told reporters bluntly, "We campaigned on compassion, on humanity, on fixing immigration with dignity, and now we're being forced to defend a policy more extreme than anything the Conservatives ever attempted." The word spreading in hushed tones through the tea rooms is mutiny, and for Keir Starmer, that is the nightmare scenario. A party that only just clawed its way into power is already threatening to fracture from within. Starmer's inner circle is in emergency mode. Meetings are running late into the night. Ministers are snapping at each other in front of staff. Rachel Reeves is demanding answers about the economic fallout. Luke Pollard is warning that converting military bases into detention centres could spark public outrage and damage Britain's international image. Even loyalists inside Starmer's team are now questioning his grip on the government, whispering that Mahmood's defiance has humiliated the Prime Minister. "It makes him look weak," one aide admitted. "If the Home Secretary can act without him, then who's really in charge?" That's the brutal question haunting Number 10 tonight. But Starmer's problem isn't just inside Labour, it's outside too. The Conservatives smell blood. In Parliament, the Tory frontbench is hammering him relentlessly, reminding voters of Labour's years of self-righteous speeches condemning immigration controls. Now, they say, Labour hasn't just copied Tory policy, they've gone further, shutting the door on legal migration entirely. The word hypocrisy is being repeated so often in the Commons that it's threatening to stick like glue. And for voters watching at home, the message is simple. Labour campaigned on compassion, but now they are delivering cruelty. That kind of charge can destroy trust in weeks, not years. The press is circling too. Even traditionally Labour-friendly outlets are running front-page headlines blasting the government for incompetence, panic and hypocrisy. Tabloids are screaming about chaos at the border. Broadsheets are warning of economic suicide. For a Prime Minister who promised calm after Conservative chaos, the optics are devastating. The image of Starmer raging behind closed doors while his government stumbles into crisis is political poison. And it's only getting worse. Every day the visa freeze remains in place. The pressure builds. Every university forced to cancel overseas student intakes. Every company losing access to skilled workers. Every family torn apart by frozen visas adds another layer of fury. And that fury is directed squarely at Starmer. Internationally, Britain is looking isolated. India is already drafting retaliatory measures, hinting at delays for UK travellers and tighter restrictions on British firms operating on Indian soil. Nigeria has summoned the British High Commissioner for an explanation. Pakistan's Foreign Ministry has issued a sharp warning that relations could be damaged if the freeze continues. EU diplomats are privately fuming, saying the move undermines attempts to reset ties after Brexit. Britain's trading partners are confused and angry, and that confusion is spreading into the markets. The pound has already shown signs of wobbling, with investors nervous that Labour's immigration gamble could spiral into economic self-sabotage. But perhaps the most dangerous threat is closer to home. Inside the Labour Party, whispers of rebellion are getting louder. Several MPs are already considering resigning from junior roles in protest. Some are even floating the idea of publicly challenging Mahmood's position. And in politics, once rebellion begins to stir, it is hard to stop. Starmer knows this. He knows that if Mahmood becomes a lightning rod for discontent, his entire government could unravel. Yet sacking her risks looking weak and indecisive. Standing by her risks economic collapse and political mutiny. It is a lose-lose situation, and every day he waits, the noose tightens. Meanwhile, Mahmood is standing her ground. To allies, she insists she acted out of necessity, not defiance. She argues the immigration system was buckling under the weight of asylum claims, and that drastic action was the only way to prevent total collapse. Her message is blunt. Better to freeze visas now than watch the system implode completely in 6 months. But her opponents inside Labour see something more dangerous, a Home Secretary carving her own path, willing to defy the Prime Minister, willing to gamble with Britain's economy and reputation to prove a point. To them, Mahmood isn't saving the system, she's sabotaging the government. And here lies the political firestorm. Is this the moment Labour's unity shatters? The moment Starmer's authority cracks? Or is this the moment Mahmood cements herself as the most powerful figure in the cabinet, the minister who dared to act when others hesitated? For now, nobody knows. What is clear is that Britain is caught in the crossfire. Families, businesses, universities, and international partners are paying the price while Labour tears itself apart behind closed doors. And the question echoing tonight is chilling. Has Shabana Mahmood just pulled the trigger on Labour's first great civil war? And if so, can Keir Starmer survive the fallout? If Westminster was already in flames, the economic shockwave from Shabana Mahmood's visa freeze is now turning into a full-scale inferno. Behind the headlines of political chaos, businesses and universities are quietly screaming into Downing Street phones, warning that Britain is standing on the edge of an economic cliff. The freeze isn't just an immigration issue anymore. It's a direct assault on the financial lifeblood of the country, and the numbers are staggering. Let's start with universities. Every year, international students pump nearly £30 billion into the UK economy. They pay tuition fees, triple that of British students. They rent flats. They spend on food, travel, and culture. For countless institutions outside London, overseas students aren't just welcome, they're survival. But now, with student visas frozen, that entire revenue stream is at risk. Universities are warning that their intakes for the upcoming term could collapse overnight, leaving them facing bankruptcy. Vice-chancellors are warning of mass redundancies. Research projects dependent on foreign talent could be shelved. Britain's reputation as a global education hub is in tatters. And it happened with the stroke of one order from Mahmood's desk. Then there's the business sector. Tech companies, healthcare providers, construction giants all rely on skilled workers from abroad to keep vital projects running. Already, CEOs are reporting projects on hold because they can't bring staff into the country. Startups dependent on international talent are warning of mass cancellations. The Confederation of British Industry has sounded the alarm, saying this freeze risks strangling Labour's promised growth agenda before it even begins. Even companies that supported Labour in the election are turning hostile, accusing Starmer of sabotaging their future. The message from the private sector is clear. Reverse this freeze or risk economic disaster. But perhaps the most immediate crisis is in Britain's public services. The NHS has been leaning heavily on overseas recruitment to fill thousands of staff shortages. Now, with visas frozen, that pipeline is cut off. Hospitals are warning of catastrophic consequences. Waiting lists, already sky-high, are set to grow longer. GP surgeries in desperate need of doctors from abroad may have to shut their doors. For a Prime Minister who promised to fix the NHS, the timing is lethal. The freeze has handed his opponents a weapon, and they are using it ruthlessly. In Parliament, Tory MPs are demanding to know why Labour is blocking the very staff the NHS needs to survive. In the media, stories of patients facing longer waits and cancelled appointments are already appearing. For Starmer, the political optics are disastrous. He campaigned on rebuilding public services, and now his government has cut off the workforce those services depend on. The pound is wobbling, markets are unsettled, and economists are warning of deeper trouble ahead. If universities collapse, if business projects stall, if the NHS falters, Britain could be plunged into a financial crisis. Investors are already nervous, and the whispers in the City of London are grim. Labour's immigration panic could trigger a recession. For a government that promised stability, this is the ultimate betrayal, and the international backlash is compounding the crisis. India has hinted at slowing or suspending work permits for British nationals. Nigeria is considering reciprocal visa restrictions. EU partners are warning of retaliatory measures. Diplomats describe Britain as unreliable, saying the sudden freeze makes international agreements worthless. The ripple effect is clear. If foreign governments retaliate, British businesses will face blockades abroad, tourists will encounter delays, and Britain's standing on the global stage will be further diminished. What began as an attempt to manage migration is now snowballing into an international trade and diplomacy nightmare. Inside the cabinet, the fractures are widening. Rachel Reeves is sounding the alarm about collapsing markets and the risk of recession. Luke Pollard is furious that the military could be dragged into housing asylum seekers, something Labour promised never to do. Other ministers, fearful of losing their own seats, are privately warning Starmer that they cannot defend the freeze to constituents who expected a more humane approach. The atmosphere is described as combustible, with one insider admitting, "This government is eating itself alive." Meanwhile, Starmer is trapped. If he reverses the freeze, he looks weak, a prime minister unable to control his own Home Secretary. If he supports it, he risks detonating the economy and facing rebellion inside his own party. Either choice could doom him. And Mahmood? She remains defiant. To her allies, she's the only minister willing to confront the immigration crisis head-on. To her critics, she's a rogue operator, driving Britain into ruin to prove her authority. The standoff between Prime Minister and Home Secretary is escalating into a test of survival, and the stakes could not be higher. The public mood is shifting fast. At first, some voters welcomed the freeze as proof that Labour was finally taking immigration seriously. But now, as stories spread of families torn apart, students losing futures, and businesses shutting down, the tide is turning. Anger is growing. Protest is brewing. For a government still in its infancy, this is catastrophic. A honeymoon period that should have lasted months has been shattered in days, replaced by fury, fear, and betrayal. This is not just a political storm, it is a perfect storm. Immigration crisis, economic collapse, diplomatic backlash, cabinet rebellion, all colliding at once. And at the centre stands Keir Starmer, a prime minister who promised strength and stability, but who now looks cornered, humiliated, and weak. The question that haunts Westminster tonight is not just whether the visa freeze will end, it's whether Starmer's leadership itself can survive the firestorm Mahmood has unleashed. The crisis has reached boiling point, and tonight Westminster is holding its breath. For Keir Starmer, this is no longer just about immigration, it's about survival. The freeze on visas has morphed into a monster, devouring his authority, tearing his party apart, and pushing Britain toward the edge of political collapse. Every hour that passes, the walls close in tighter, and the question is brutally clear. Can Starmer survive, or is this the beginning of his downfall? Inside Parliament, the atmosphere is electric with tension. Tory MPs, once accused of cruelty on immigration, are now jeering at Labour for doing something even harsher. Barbaric, Labour called it back then. Yet here they are, enforcing a blanket freeze without a whisper of debate. The hypocrisy charge has sunk its teeth deep into the government, and it is not letting go. Conservative backbenchers are circling like sharks, sensing blood in the water. The opposition benches roar with every stumble, every hesitation, every weak response from Starmer. The Prime Minister, who campaigned on moral clarity, now looks cornered, defensive, and humiliated. But the real battle isn't in the chamber. It's inside Labour itself. Backbench rebellion is no longer whispered. It's being openly plotted. Furious MPs are preparing letters of protest, demanding the freeze be lifted immediately. Some are even hinting at resignations, threatening to walk out of junior government roles if Starmer doesn't act. This isn't just dissent, it's insurrection. A government barely months old is already facing the spectre of mutiny. And at the centre of it all is Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary who has transformed herself into both heroine and villain overnight. To her supporters, she's the minister who dared to act when others dithered. To her enemies, she's the architect of Labour's implosion. The cabinet is fractured. Rachel Reeves is warning that the economic consequences could spiral into a recession that will sink Labour's credibility for a generation. Luke Pollard is furious at the militarisation of immigration policy. Senior figures, once united, are now divided into camps. Those backing Mahmood's defiance and those demanding her head. Starmer is caught between them, paralysed. Sacking Mahmood risks detonating open war within Labour, but keeping her risks shattering the economy and alienating allies abroad. Either way, his authority is bleeding away, drip by drip. Meanwhile, the public is turning. At first, some welcomed the freeze, believing it signalled toughness. But now, with businesses warning of collapse, families stranded apart, and universities facing financial ruin, the anger is boiling over. Protests are already being planned outside Parliament. Families are appearing on TV with heartbreaking stories of loved ones locked out of the country. Business leaders are taking to the airwaves to slam Labour for sabotaging growth. Even Labour-friendly media is abandoning the government, blasting Starmer for incompetence and hypocrisy. The honeymoon is not just over, it's ended in flames. And abroad, the firestorm grows. India has hinted at suspending new visas for British citizens. Nigeria is considering retaliatory measures. EU diplomats are warning that Britain's credibility has been destroyed. The freeze has turned allies into adversaries, friends into foes, and the international fallout could take years to repair. Britain, already struggling to rebuild trust after Brexit, now looks like an unreliable partner once again. The humiliation is complete, and the world is watching. For Starmer, the pressure is unbearable. Sources inside Number 10 describe him as more furious than ever, raging behind closed doors, demanding options, demanding solutions, but finding none. Every choice is a trap. Every path leads to disaster. His leadership, once sold as competent and steady, now looks fragile, brittle, and exposed. And that perception is deadly. In politics, weakness invites attack, and Starmer's weakness is now visible for all to see. The whispers are growing louder. Is this the beginning of the end? Could Labour, so fresh from victory, implode under the weight of its first true crisis? Could Shabana Mahmood, in her determination to stop the asylum system collapsing, end up collapsing the government instead? These are the questions haunting Westminster tonight. And here's the brutal truth. This is no longer just about visas, or students, or even immigration policy. This is about power, authority, and survival. It's about whether Keir Starmer can hold his party, his cabinet, and his country together, or whether this freeze becomes the spark that burns his government to the ground. Mahmood's move was meant to be an emergency stop. Instead, it may be the trigger that stops Starmer's premiership in its tracks. As the dust settles, Britain is left paralysed. The immigration system is frozen, the economy is under siege, international partners are furious, and the Prime Minister's authority lies shattered. The political storm is not calming, it's intensifying. And the question echoing through every corridor of power tonight is chilling in its simplicity. Has Keir Starmer already lost control of his government? And if so, how long before the entire house of cards comes crashing down?